Welcome to this new part of the beginner series where I'm going to talk you through the makeup steps as if you were a child, because this is, in my opinion, the easiest way to explain something to a bunch of people where I don't know how much knowledge they bring with. And today we're talking about foundation. I feel like foundation is probably, besides eyeshadow, the category where the most insecurities are with people, because they are not sure what foundation to choose out of the thousands that we probably have. What color? What's the difference between shade and undertone? Is there a difference? And what if I cannot find a matching foundation? Can I make it match? These are all questions that we are going to cover, and I highly advise you, pause the video, get a drink, maybe get something to write, because we are getting deep dive into color theory and into the Monzel color system. What kind of foundation do you need? What is existing in the market? And we start with the one that have the least coverage, skin tints. I do have a variation of skin tints. These are just two examples: the Summer Fridays Sheer Skin Tint and the Fenty Ease Drop. Skin tints usually have a very low coverage. They are very good when you want to have just a light layer of something that is kind of evening out your skin tone without covering too much. Besides your regular liquid skin tint, there is also like watery skin tints. For example, the Chanel Water Fresh tint. They have these little balls, little dots of color that's inside of water. That's even lighter in the feeling than a regular skin tint. There is a second one of this. The Rose Ink has something very similar. I like them both, so that's just an example of that. Skin tints are not foundations. In my personal opinion, there is a difference. A foundation starts with light to medium coverage, and a good example for that is the Saie Super Glow. Is it Super Glow? Saie Glowy Super Skin Foundation. This has a light buildable to medium coverage, but that's also a dewy finish. We will talk about the finishes in a second. After that, we have the foundations that do have a medium to full coverage. So if you apply a thin layer, you get a very good coverage, but there is like no problem to build this up having it borderline full coverage. For example, Lisa Eldridge Seamless Skin Foundation or Chanel No. 1 is definitely fitting this description. And then we have full coverage foundation. It is barely impossible to apply these foundation without having already a full layer of makeup on. There is a time and place for that. You can shear them out by using different tools, but in general, these are very opaque on the skin. For example, the classic MAC Studio Fix Fluid, or in my opinion, the Hourglass Ambient Soft Glow Foundation is also full coverage. There is no real definition of full coverage or not full coverage, because what I myself consider as a full coverage foundation, a lot of other creators that I watch on YouTube say, oh, this is medium coverage. No, not to me. And besides liquid foundations, there are also cream foundations. They usually come in a compact and you can just cream them on your face. For example, Patrick Ta has one, I think it's Double Take or something like that, that has the cream foundation, then the powder. You also have stick foundations, for example, like the Tom Ford Traces Soft Matte Stick Foundation or the Westman Atelier Stick. Or if you like it more matte, you can also use a powder foundation. I do have only one powder foundation. This is the Makeup Forever HD Skin Matte Velvet Foundation, but I think the most known and classic powder foundation is from Bare Minerals. I never tried that, so I cannot tell you a lot about powder foundation. I myself, I'm not a powder foundation girl, so that's why we are focusing on liquid foundations. Now that we know what kind of foundations we have, let's talk about finishes. Remember, we did a video about primers last week that we talked about finishes too. They're mattifying primers, luminizing primers, and you will find the exact same thing in foundations. A very good example for a mattifying foundation is the Tom Ford Traceless Soft Matte Foundation. And if you remember, I applied the Primer Brother on my face last week. So these two basically go very well together. Let's stay in the Tom Ford line, because this Traceless Soft Matte Foundation has a sister, That is the Shade and Illuminate foundation. So this, as the name suggests, is an illuminating foundation. Then we also have foundations that they're not matte, they're not dewy, they're like in between to give you a hydrated skin look. That, for example, is the Estee Lauder Futurist Hydra Rescue, and it says moisturizing makeup. This will make your skin even out, but it will also make your skin look like you just freshly applied a moisturizer. I myself do not have a preferred finish in the foundation because it always depends on the look that I'm going for. That's why I usually do eyes first and then the rest of my face, because when I do very dramatic eye looks, I don't think that a skin tint like the Water Fresh tint from Chanel is matching that. So you should, when you decide what kind of foundation to wear, also think about the look that you want to wear in general. A dramatic, full-on color beat look needs an evened out base because you want to have the attention to this area and not, for example, to this area, because this in my face, these are wounds. Like I literally scratch them open because I'm a nervous skin picker. Every foundation is able to be layered, but I personally do not recommend layering too much. If you have spots like this, like me, go in with a concealer. You can imagine yourself a concealer as the dense version of your foundation. This is much more intense, much higher coverage. And I'm not talking about under eye concealer. That's a whole nother topic. I'm talking about face concealers. I myself do only have two. I do have the REM, what's it called? Is it Sweetener Concealer? I think it's a Sweetener Concealer in the shade 6N, but my favorite is the NARS Soft Matte Concealer in the spot in the shade Chantilly. If you have certain spots to cover on your face, do this with a concealer, and I highly recommend do this before foundation. Apply the concealer, let it sit for a while. You can even powder it down a tiny bit and then go over it with your foundation. Because when you just slather on the foundation, layer after layer after layer after layer, it has no time to breathe. It cannot dry down completely. It will look cakey, it will break up during the day. When your oils come through, it will look just like shit. So we now have the different types of foundations and we have different finishes of foundations. And now, let me just tell you something. This, as well as this, and this, and this, and this, they all match my skin. They look all completely different, but they do match me. And to understand why a foundation with a certain color and undertone does match your face, we have to do a bit of a deep dive into color theory. This color theory thing we will talk about throughout this whole series because this is important for bronzer, for contour, for blush, a little bit for highlighter, and also most important for eyeshadow and for pairing colors. But it is also important for foundation. So I will put the image of a color wheel somewhere up here so that you can follow my saying, but I will also show you this with my printed out version. The easy color theory says everything, every color that you see contains out of the three colors red, blue, and yellow. These are the baseline. That means, in general, you could apply a red, a blue, and a yellow on your face. Equal parts, mix them up, and you will end up with a skin tone. But now the question is, do you have a darker or a lighter skin tone? Do you have warm or neutral or cool undertones? Because now, I fold up my color circle, you can see this very, very easy. When you mix red and blue, you end up with a secondary shade that is purple. And what you can do now, when you have your secondary color, you can take that secondary color, mix it with your primary, and get the tertiary color. Tertiary? Wait, is that correct?
Tertiary.
Tertiary. Thank you, Google. That is just a simplified version. Color is something that is endless. You cannot think of a new color. It is impossible. The combination between primary, secondary, primary, tertiary, tertiary, secondary, the way how you mix these is endless. And now we take it a step further because, as I said, you could apply these 3 colors to your face and you will end up, when you mix them, with a brownish shade. That brownish shade is your neutral baseline. Now, are you somebody like me? I do call myself low-fat milk, so that means I am very light. I have to lighten this because our primary colors, they are pure. It's the pure color code. To change this now, we need black and white. Black and white are technically no colors. Depending on where you look, especially like in digital color coding, black and white is not a color, it's a mixer. With white, you lighten up a color. With black, you darken the color. So when you mix your primary shades together, you will add white to make this lighter, or you add black to make it darker. For me, I could use these 3 colors, apply it on the face, mix it, and I will add some white to lighten that up. Still, at this point, I'm still not matching my face color because there is one thing missing, and that is your undertone. The undertone you can understand as the base vibe that you have. For example, let's take our color wheel again. It is very easy to be seen in the green here. So you have your, green consists out of yellow and blue. I think that's easy. When you mix these, you end up with your secondary shade. And now you can take that secondary shade, that is a green, and you can add either some more yellow, so you end up with this lighter greenish yellow shade that has a warmer undertone, or you can mix in some of the blue that will make your green cool tone. Basically, when you, wait a second, let me fold this in half. When you look at the color wheel like that, you have a cool tone side and you have a warm tone side. And your skin has warm or cool undertones. There are also olive undertones. There is something like a neutral undertone, depending on who you watch and what kind of understanding of color that person has. They will tell you there are no neutral undertones. This is just not there because it's desaturated. And that makes totally sense when we go into the Mansell color system. In general, when we talk about foundation, for like beginners, for easy foundation match, we are talking about cool, neutral and warm undertones. I am a light, fair, sometimes even pale, depending on the time of the year person with neutral but leaning more warm undertones. That means to make a foundation out of the primary colors that we know, I had to mix red, yellow and blue. Then I have to mix some white in to lighten it up, and then I have to mix some more yellow in to give it a more warm undertone. How do you know now what kind of undertone you have? There are so many techniques to find out your undertone. I think the easiest one is to check your veins. I don't know if you can see, but your veins that basically just go along here, and of course today my veins are not that good visible. My veins are very kind of greenish. Greenish looking veins are saying you have more of a warm undertone. Bluish looking veins are more of a cool undertone, and if you cannot decide, you're probably in between a neutral undertone. In general, when you buy a foundation or when you want to color match yourself to a foundation, it is much easier to match yourself to an undertone than to a color. So that means you can totally buy the wrong foundation color as long as it is in the right undertone. Of course, we have like just a small spectrum, so I cannot buy a neutral leaning warm toned foundation in a tan shade. That I cannot make work. But very good example, this Say foundation is a bit too dark for me, but it has a warm undertone, so I can make it work with bronzer, with contour, with blush. So by the end of the day, you cannot detect that this foundation does not match me. So now let's make a tiny excursus to a more in-depth color system, and that is the Mansell color system. This is mostly used in art, in digital artwork, in digital color work, all of that, because In the Munsell color system, you basically do the exact same thing, but this has a mathematical value to it. According to this color system, every single color that we see can be imagined as a sphere, as a 3D ball. And in that ball, that consists of different axes. So you have a horizontal, vertical, and then around. Every single color that we have can be divided up in 3 different categories to describe it. First of all, you have the hue. Our color theory or color wheel that we have, that is 2D. We can take that color wheel now and make this as the middle layer of our sphere that we are going to talk about. And then this circle here, these shapes, this is the hue. This is the color basically. The color is purple, the color is green, the color is blue, without any additions mixed in. If we take now this as the middle of our Munsell color system, we can now add more layers stacking on top or underneath, depending on the amount of white or black that we are going to add. And that is the so-called value. The more white you add, the lighter your color gets until you get at the highest point where you have the pure white. The more black you add, the darker your color gets, and then you end up at this lowest point with a pure black. That is basically the value. And you can stack this endlessly on top. If you add a little bit of white, you make the colors a little bit lighter. If you add more white, it gets even lighter, 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 and so on. And now in this 3D model, let's take this as a center. Then you have something that is called the chroma or saturation. And that basically defines the intensity of the color. This is basically what I was talking about. So you have your hues around, you have the value white to black, and then when you go straight from the center outwards along your different hues of this color theory, you have the chroma. In the Munsell color theory, that means that the center of our little color ball is basically gray. And from that gray on, we go in the different chroma directions. Why is that important to know? Because this is the basic knowledge for you to understand why a certain foundation works on your skin tone or not. And you want to match your foundation never to your face. I know that sounds crazy, but let me show you something. Let me take a little bit of this Estee Lauder Future Hydra Rescue Foundation and I just do a stripe in the middle of my face. You can see that this foundation is completely different to my face color. I now take the same and I apply this on my jawline and I drag it down towards the neck. And you can still see a bit of a difference between the neck and the foundation, but the secret is blending. And when I blend this out, you can see how the foundation literally disappeared. And this is how you match yourself. You match yourself to your neck area because this is where your foundation has to blend in. That's why sometimes when you have people who are maybe very tanned, they have a white face and their foundation is so ultra dark, but it matches this neck area. Another good example, you remember I used this in a Get Ready With Me. This foundation is too light for me. Look at this. This is way too light. But this has a warmer undertone to it. So the shade of this foundation does not match me, but the undertone matches. And now let me do the same over here. Take a little bit more. You see a distinct difference between my neck and the foundation shade, but when I go in with my brush, just blend this a little bit down into the neck area. It disappeared into the skin. When I blend this into my face, of course it will still look a bit too light, but that is something, as I said earlier, you can balance that out with a powder. You can balance that out with a bronzer. This foundation, again, is too light for me, so I would balance that out by using a bit more bronzer, a bit more contour, so that I give dimension back to the face. While in the Munsell color system, what you definitely use for art and color work, the chroma basically says something about the level of grayness in that color, I want to change that for translucency. So instead of chroma, we are judging our colors by opaqueness and translucency. The more translucent your colors are, the more of your real skin will show through. The more opaque it is, the less skin you will see. Keep in mind, it is impossible. It doesn't matter what kind of makeup item we are talking about. You will never ever reach 100% opaqueness. This is just not possible because your skin will always shine through. If you want to have 100% opaqueness, you had to take a full coverage foundation and apply this with a spatula or something and no blending out. As soon as you start blending, you are mixing it in and your skin will come through. And because of this translucency and the fact that your skin shows through, you are able to mix a color in with your skin that does not match you. For example, this. When you see this in the bottle, this looks way too dark for me, but let me show you something. So I just pumped something on my mixing plate and now I'm taking this with my finger and I apply this here. So you see a bit of foundation. It's a bit too orange in my opinion, but as soon as I start blending, like I basically just rub this into my face, it shifts. And this color, I mean, this is now completely unblended whatsoever, but this does not shift because of like very secret technology. This shifts because of the fact that this is translucent, because my skin color shows through, it kind of adapts to that and it mixes in. And therefore, you see, I'm not even using a brush, I'm just using my finger. It is nearly blended into my skin. And since I now applied so much on my forehead, I just now do the rest of my face with the Chanel Water Fresh tint. You have different techniques to apply a foundation, and it always, in my opinion, depends, first of all, what are your personal preferences and what is the preference of the foundation, because there are foundations that will not work with a sponge. A skin tint that is water-based will not work with a sponge because the sponge is going to soak up your foundation. But if you have a more full coverage foundation like the MAC Studio Fix, a sponge is a heavenly gift because it will shear out a bit if you want to have that, and it will distribute the foundation a bit better without soaking everything up. I myself am personally a big fan of mixing techniques. So that means I apply with my fingers like the beginner part, then I take a brush and I blend everything in. And you see, with this translucent foundation, even with a brush, everything is blended in. Everything looks nice. Blend down your neck. That is something people forgot in the 2000s. That's why we have hilarious pictures of our younger selves with this foundation border on our jawline. Can you see what the skin tint did? I think you can. It evened out. A lot of my redness that I have here is gone now, but these spots are still there. So that's why I'm now going in with concealer. Since I haven't done this before the makeup application, I'm doing it now. And here I do something I don't like. I apply this with a finger. You see, I go directly on top and the concealer is so highly concentrated, you don't need much. I think this specific concealer now I opened maybe 2 years ago, and it's still going strong. And I do still have some foundation on my mixing plate, so I just dip my sponge in and now I go over that with the sponge a bit, but also tap on top with a brush. One last thing to mention, besides the type of foundation, the finish of foundation, we can go even deeper into the foundation and talk about ingredients, because you have on the market silicone-based, oil-based and water-based foundations. Depending on your primer, it is possible that these will not work together. For example, if you have a water-based foundation on top of an oil-based primer, what happens when you mix water and oil? They don't work together. Instead of now trying to be a chemist and start to analyze the ingredients, I recommend do just a patch test on your hand. Like take your desired primer, apply this all over your hand, take your desired foundation, apply this on top, let that sit for a couple hours and just see what happens. Most of the times you get an immediate reaction by this pilling. I talked about this in the primer video, you know, this little little sausages of product that are basically coming off your face. That means these two products do not work together. They're kind of like not absorbing into each other, and they just want to split up and ruin your makeup life. I know this was a whole lot of information. I hope this is helpful. If I forgot anything about foundations, about matching you, about not matching, about the colors, the undertones, then please let me know. I'm happy to answer this down below. Please do not forget, I'm not a makeup artist. Everything that I know, I just showed myself, I learned myself. I teached myself the whole color theory thing. That is how crazy I am. But keep that color theory thing in mind, because we will definitely need this when it comes to eyeshadows. If you like this beginner series, please let me know down below. Ask your questions down below. I might cover them in a separate video, or I will answer them directly under that video. Don't forget to subscribe and that shit, because I want to try to give you every single Wednesday an episode of this beginner series, so that you can basically do your makeup step by step and learn something new every week. In the info box you have the links to TikTok, to Instagram, and also to a page that is called Buy Me a Coffee. There you can buy, of course, that is like no pressure whatsoever. You can buy me a slice of pizza. That money goes into this channel to basically finance future purchases. If you do that, thank you so much. And to everybody who already donated money, thank you so much. You are fucking awesome, and I'm totally overwhelmed with that feeling, to be honest. But we will talk about that somewhere else. Other than that, thank you for watching. I hope you find that helpful, and I will see you in the next one.